Hi, this is Dave the Book Nerd. I'm hoping you'll add me to your rotation for science fiction discussion and review. Today we'll be getting into The Ferryman by Justin Cronin. It's not one of the more commonly reviewed books out there, but I picked it up while I was on a trip and I thought it was pretty darn good. So let's get into it. You may know Justin Cronin from The Passage, right? I read that book a number of years ago and I really liked it. Thought it was a good page turner, but it wasn't quite my style, so I didn't read the full trilogy. But that's one of the reasons I picked this up and at least looked at the back. And the other thing is the book was kind of in the bestseller section of this little locally owned bookstore. And so I looked at the back and the plot sounded kind of interesting. So let me get into it and we'll talk about the setting, the plot, what I liked about it, and I'll even read a little passage from the novel as well. Let me get into the setting of The Ferryman. We start off on the island of Prospero, where people of privilege live a life full of leisure activities, tennis, dining, drinking, and they just seem to have, they have a little bit of work, but it seems to be fairly light, and they just have a life of privilege. Of course, you can't have a life of privilege without service staff, right? So you have another set of people who live on an island called the Annex, and they're basically all the worker bees that keep the island of Prospero running. All right, so right off the bat, you kind of see an opportunity for some potential class conflict or class warfare, okay? Now, Cronin does not add like an ethnic component or anything like that, probably to avoid trying to draw parallels to maybe society today, and people think, oh, he's trying to make some kind of a point or a parable about inequality in society today. It's really purely just a science fiction book. Although, we are getting into how people of privilege generally want to stay people of privilege. And to do that, you definitely need an underclass to serve all your needs, okay? So the plot. We've got a gentleman by the name of Proctor, and his job in this world is the ferryman, right? So what does the ferryman do? He takes people who are kind of aging out of this island. They don't have funerals or burials, or they don't die natural deaths. At some point in time, some sensor on their arm tells the government that it's about time for them to shuffle off this mortal coil. All right, so they get on a ferry and they get hauled off to some island to get, I don't know, recycled. Lord knows. But you avoid this whole nursing home bit and dementia and old age. As soon as you kind of start to fade, they figure that out and they move you off, okay? And now there's another boat that kind of comes in periodically, I think it's weekly, full of 16-year-olds. You don't have any kids around. They're 16, so they're kind of fully developed, physically adults at 16, and they come in and they're picked up as by guardians. So they're picked up as children and raised by some families for 2-3 years, whatever, until they reach that age of majority where they can go off and get a job and become part of this leisure class, okay? So that's kind of interesting. So where does the plot really take off, right? You've got Proctor. He's married. His wife comes from a family with connections, which got him this nice little job in the government. But he starts to have a little bit of marital strife. We find out that there's some type of resistance moving going on in the Annex, of course, some type of underground. He'll meet a woman named Theo, also from Prospero, but who's kind of plugged into that underground, and Proctor kind of gets plugged in there as well. But what really sets up all this action, kind of the incident, is when Proctor finds out that he has to take his father to across, on the ferry, right? So his father's time has come. All right, now most people go peacefully. They go line up, they get on the ferry, they go across. They're sad, but they know that this is what life is all about. Well, it was a different matter with his father. His father kind of created a scene before getting on the boat. Some uncomfortable things happened. Proctor ended up beating up some guard who was interfering physically with his father. Ended up losing his job from the fracas. But his father blurted out, "Oranios!" And he's trying to figure out, what is that? And then this was kind of a bad thing, some kind of a secret. right? So this is really the whole escalating incident that gets the plot rolling, right? From then on, Proctor is looking for answers, right? There's some kind of conspiracy. There's some hidden things. He's digging into computer records. He meets Thea and goes off to the annex and tries to understand what's going on over there. There's escalating conflict between the underclass on the annex and the people in Prospero. But also, as Proctor digs and delves into things, he gets into a little bit more trouble here and there, and so we're creating some conflict even within the island of Prospero between Proctor and some of the other people in power there. Okay, so as the conflict escalates, eventually we find out kind of the resolution, right? We find out what's going on. What is the secret, right? Between the resistance and the conflict and getting to the big reveal, it's a little rocky for me. It's that transitional period was a little bit weird. I can't say I lost interest, but navigating through that to the big reveal wasn't perfect, right? So that's probably the only reason the novel's not an A or A plus for me. But once we got there and the big reveal, it was good. The conflict continued once we have the big reveal, and there was a fairly satisfying ending. I've read a few reviews where folks say, "Oh, the last third of the book just killed it for me. It ruined my story." But I kind of like transitioning from the story of Prospero to the big reveal of what's really going on behind the scenes. Okay, and to me, it was pretty satisfying. Was it a unique ending? No, actually, I've seen that. When I saw that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen this once before in some other thing that I've seen or read. But it was still really good, and the way they did it and wrapped it was really good. Okay, in terms of the writing style was very fluid. It was an easy read, and I think from the science fiction perspective, it wouldn't be too challenging for an entry-level science fiction reader. I mean, it reads almost like a bestseller. It's one of those books where when I'm sitting down to eat my lunch or something during the day, I could pick it up and rip through 10, 20 pages, right, while I'm just eating my sandwich. Where some science fiction books in particular, are a little bit more harder to access, right? And I'm sitting down, I've got to go back 3 pages just to get to where I was. And I might just read the 3 or 4 pages, maybe plus a couple of paragraphs by the time I finish lunch, right? So some books, it can take you half an hour to get really into the groove. Whereas this one, you can pick it up right where you left off, and you're just flowing, right? And if you flip through the pages, you'll see there's dialogue on almost every page. So it's really more narratively told through dialogue as opposed to us following the actions of somebody and maybe some of his internal monologue and things like that. So there's always some kind of activity, discussion, people running into each other, talking through things, and you really get a feel for what's going on, what people are thinking. So it's a nice character-driven, dialogue-driven way of storytelling. And just to get a feel for the writing style, I thought I'd read one passage, okay? So we'll get started here. "Let's go," Jess says. They make their way quickly through the alleys, emerging into a public market of shuttered stalls. They're about to step from cover when Anton holds up his hand. His hearing is keener than hers, able to parse the smallest sounds. There it is, coming from the left. The whiz of the drone. They duck beneath an awning. The drone glides over the tops of the buildings away. "Good ears," Jess whispers. Their destination is an old watchman's kiosk at the end of the block. No longer used, it is still a symbol. It stands alone in the street, without easily available cover. So a challenge, but worth the added danger. "We were here," their message will say. "Right here. Right in the middle of everything, you fuckers." So this is some people in the resistance wanting to make some kind of a point, maybe with a little graffiti or something. Okay, so anyway, pretty cool, pretty well written, easy to follow, and some tension. You get a feel for what's going on there. Overall, I'd give the book a B+. I love the reading. It was really smooth. It's something I'd probably pick up and I don't know if I'd pick it up and read again because I know the reveal. I think the reveal was cool. And frankly, the final resolution, how are they going to resolve this? But it was fairly satisfying how they worked out the final resolution, right? And it was a totally separate set of problems in different world, and so it was kind of almost like two books in one, you know, when we got to the resolution. But definitely worth a try. Check it out. Justin Cronin, the Ferryman. Again, Dave the Book Nerd. Throw me a like, subscribe, throw a comment out there. I'd like to know if you've read it, and also I'd be curious if what your thoughts are on the passage as well. If it'd be worthwhile finishing that whole trilogy. All right. Hope to see y'all again next time. Thanks.